somewhere else. Yeah. All right, here we go. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari and Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahamsa Parijikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai ISKCON BVT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parijikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, we'll be on page 339 today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 27th day of November 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the 7th chapter entitled Knowledge of the Absolute, text number 27, page 339. Ichadvesha samutena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa Ichadvesha samuttena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa Ichadvesha samuttena dvandvamohena bharata Sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. Go ahead. Ichadvesha samutena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. Ichadvesha samuttena Dvandvamohena bharata Sarvabhutani sammoham Sarge yanti parantapa. Icha, desire, dvesha, and hate. Samutena, arisen from, dvandva, of duality, mohena, by the illusion, bharata, O scion of Bharat, sarva, all, bhutani, living entities, sammoham, into delusion, sarge, while taking birth, yanti, go, parantapa, O conqueror of enemies. Translation. O scion of Bharat, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. A scion is a descendant. Purport. The real constitutional position of the living entity is that of subordination to the Supreme Lord, who is pure knowledge. When one is deluded into separation from this pure knowledge, he becomes controlled by the illusory energy and cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The illusory energy is manifested in the duality of desire and hate. Due to desire and hate, the ignorant person wants to become one with the Supreme Lord and envies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pure devotees, who are not deluded or contaminated by desire and hate, can understand that Lord Shri Krishna appears by his internal potencies. But those who are deluded by duality and nescience think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is created by material energies. This is their misfortune. Such deluded persons, symptomatically, dwell in dualities of dishonor and honor, misery and happiness, woman and man, good and bad, pleasure and pain, etc., thinking, this is my wife, this is my house, I am the master of this house, I am the husband of this wife. These are the dualities of delusion. Those who are so deluded by dualities are completely foolish and therefore cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is quite a revolutionary statement. Krishna is saying that all of the things that we treasure in this world, the things that we identify ourselves with, that we think are very important to strive for, and other things we think are important to avoid, it's all a big delusion. And this delusion, which he recalls dvandva moha, the delusion of duality, of the heat and cold, pleasure and pain, all of these things, is what makes it impossible. Sammoham means totally bewildered here. Sammoham. To understand Krishna is, as he says earlier in this chapter, Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrata. I think he said that in this chapter. That I am not visible to everyone. Yeah, which is 25 was it? Yeah. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrata. Just a few verses back. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent, for them I am covered by my internal potency, yoga maya, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible, or unborn and inexhaustible. So just to remind you, I mentioned this, yoga maya expands as Mahamaya. It's actually one personality. That's why he says yoga maya samavrata. So what is it that makes people foolish? It's this identification with the unreal, or identification with the what we're not, the physical body, and also the mental body. So that misidentification, which is born out of envy. Prabhupada explained, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but it came up this morning in this morning's class, because this morning's class was describing the fall of the jiva, how we became covered and we left the spiritual world. So Prabhupada would cite this verse that we just read as scriptural backing or support for that understanding. So what does this mean? Icha dvesha, desire, and dvesha, hate. I desire to enjoy like Krishna desires. I hate to serve him. And that gives rise to the dvandva moha, to the delusion of duality. And that delusion, that moha, it completely bewilders samoham, all living beings. Sargayanti. Sargayanti means enters into the creation. This is one of the understandings. In other words, the spiritual world is never created. It exists eternally. This is the creation, the material world. So that's implied here. Sargayanti paranta, they enter into this creation. And in this creation, in this material world, whether it's on this planet or a higher planet or a lower planet, it's all different degrees of illusion, of delusion, because Krishna is absent. We've lost our relation, or we've forgotten our relationship with Krishna. And so we create this dream world. Prabhupada explains it in this essay he wrote called the Crow and Towel Fruit essay. I don't know if I explained this. That back in the early 70s, there was a devotee in Australia who was reading Prabhupada's books and taking out various quotes from here and there, seeming to prove that we've come down from the Brahma Jyoti. We were never in the spiritual world. And so Madhudvish Swami at the time, he was the GBC, and he wrote to Prabhupada, he said, can you please, because my understanding from your books, he said, is that, and from your lectures, is that we've left the spiritual world and we want to go back home, back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world. So please write something that we can distribute it to the devotees in Australia, so it'll definitively solve this problem, this question, because there seems to be some confusion. So Prabhupada answered him in a letter, and he attached an essay that he wrote, and it came to be known as the Crow and Towel letter, because at the end of Prabhupada explaining it, he says, but what's the point of really, of going back and forth and debating this issue? Either way, the answer is the same. The process is the same. Is developing pure devotional service, spontaneous devotional service, getting back to where we were before, so we can go back to Godhead or go to Godhead. So this Crow and Towel, he says, this is a little story. He says it's like two philosophically inclined gentlemen are sitting under a tal tree. Tal tree is the fruit, the talavan tree. And there's these ripe fruits on the tree, hanging from the branches. A crow comes down and lands on one of the branches. And then a few seconds later, the crow flies off. And the branch is vibrating and a tal flute falls down, seemingly simultaneously. So now there was a big debate now. These guys who obviously had nothing else to do, unemployed. You'll find a lot of that in India. Have you been to India? You go to India, you see them all over the place. And so they said, just see, the crow, as it flew off the tree, off the branch, it agitated the branch and caused the fruit to fall. And they said, no, you're nuts. That's not what happened. The fruit fell, and the branch moved because of the weight and scared the bird, and the bird flew off. And they proceeded to spend the rest of the afternoon arguing with that. It doesn't say they came to blows, but you can imagine that happened. So in other words, what's the use? Who cares, right? Why waste your time with this question? And yet, there is a certain element, Prabhupada did take the trouble to write his whole explanation of it. And the essence of what Prabhupada said was that we're with Krishna right now. We never left the spiritual world. No one falls from the spiritual world, but we think we do. We're deluded into thinking that we're severed from Krishna because we've forgotten him. It's just like in a dream. You create a whole dream world, a different identity for yourself. You're having an adventure here or there, or something's frightening you, right? And it's very real for you at the time, and it has some physical aspects. You could wake up sweating, screaming, right? Or sometimes you wake up, oh boy, I wish I could go back to sleep. I want to get back into that dream, right? Pleasant or unpleasant. But the point is, it's very real at the time. And night after night, we create this little dream world. And during the day, we forget it. And at night, we forget our day world, right? So we have these two worlds. In the same way, we've created this whole dream world, dream identity of ourselves as someone separate from Krishna. As someone who is mortal, right? Who dies. But you never die. That's the first lesson in Bhagavad Gita. nijayate mriyate va kadashan. There's no death at any time. We have never come into being. There aren't new souls coming into being now, and there in the future no souls will ever come into being. All the souls exist co-eternal with Krishna. But because we're minute particles, we're in this, Prabhupada explains, the tatastha, the marginal position. Meaning that we are free to turn our attention away from Krishna and put it on his external energy, and completely forget about Krishna and try to enjoy and control this material energy. And that's where we've been for seemingly millions and millions of years. But the amazing thing is, Prabhupada says, when we finally go back there and wake up, it's kind of a waking up, it'll seem like a split second has passed. It may have been hundreds of lives of Brahma, who lives for how many years? Who remembers that figure? And 40 billion. It's like a rounding error when you get that high. That's a long lifetime. But you can imagine how time is infinitely malleable. It's relative. And I think Prabhupada mentions in that letter about Brahma, how he stole the calves and the boys, and he put them away, and then a minute later or a second later he came back to see what was going on. But for us, a whole year had passed. For Krishna had been a whole year just playing with those boys and calves, which are actually just expansions of himself. And when the boys woke up, they had just felt that a moment had passed, because they were also under the Yogamaya. So the point is that what's important for us as followers of Prabhupada is that he cites this as scriptural evidence of us coming from the spiritual world. And so, and he even says, he's written in letters, we have a dormant, everyone in spiritual has a dormant capacity for sense gratification. But they're not exercising it. That capacity for kama hasn't manifest. And the same enjoying tendency is there in prema, which we take our pleasure in Krishna's pleasure. That's what prema is. The difference between prema and kama is defined in the 4th chapter of the Adi Leela. Atmandriya piti vancha tare bali kam. Krishnendriya priti vancha tare prem nam. Dare prem nam, sorry. So this is Krishna's Kaviraj. He's describing, the author of CC, the desire to satisfy one's own senses is kama. The desire to satisfy Krishna's senses is prema. And that's the whole difference. We're trying to transmute that kama back into prema. I like the word sublimate. Prabhupada gave a new meaning to the word infallible. Achyuta, infallible. He pronounced it infallible, meaning he can't fall. The actual, if you look in the dictionary, it means you can't make a mistake, right? It doesn't make any mistakes. Well, Krishna is that too. But he can't fall down. But we can, because we're infinitesimal. So that fall is actually, it's almost like falling asleep into a dream state. And when we return to Godhead, it'll just seem like a bad dream that we had. And we'll never go there again. Once burned, twice shy. So this, he's summing up now, and the chapter is almost over. But the whole point of this chapter begins with how we can know Krishna. Maya saktamana pata yogam yanjan manashaya asangsyang samagam nita gyasati tachanu. Now I'm going to tell you, Arjun, how you can develop or train your mind to be attached to me. Because the whole problem with the Ashtanga Yoga is that you're fighting this mind, which is very obstinate and very flickering. Sometimes it's compared to a wild horse that you can't train. Sometimes to a bee that is going flickering here and there, you can't control it. Or the wind, Arjun compares it to a blowing wind which you can't control. So imagine yourself, you're in the Himalayas or you're alone in your room somewhere, and the mind is going here and there, and you're wrestling with it, right? You're practicing the pranayama. It's like it's not a natural process, right? Very few can succeed. Arjun was pessimistic. So Krishna ends the chapter with a very encouraging note for Arjuna. He says, of all the yogis, the one who is always thinking of me with great faith, worshipping me with love, they're the best of all. So Arjuna is encouraged by that. But we're not on that level either. So we need a practical yoga. So Krishna is describing the next verse, which is 7.1, the first, Maya saktamana. Now if you can train the mind to be naturally attached to me, then you don't have to worry about meditation. The gopis don't practice meditation. They can't forget Krishna at any time because they're overwhelmingly in love with him. See, this is the key that the bhakti yogis have, that the Ashtanga yogis don't have, the Jnana yogis, the Karma yogis don't have. So because Krishna is all attractive, therefore, if we simply practice those things that link our mind and our senses and intelligence to Krishna, we will automatically be attracted without further effort. The whole effort is directing the senses, withdrawing them, because there has to be some discipline and austerity, withdrawing them from that impulse and that push to sense gratification, which is just a bad habit. That's what conditioning is. Conditioning means you're habituated, life after life, to go in the wrong direction. And so you think that's natural, but it's not. It's unnatural for the soul to be embodied in this bag of bones and blood. It's not us, And we're trying to, because we had experience of that Satchidananda, that all-encompassing bliss, we're always looking for that in this world, but we can't find it. And it's a frustrating experience. So life after life, the soul is suffering. There's this, you can imagine a graph, okay? So the x-axis is time, and the y-axis, the vertical axis, is your experience of pleasure. Okay? Now, this graph also goes below. If you get to 0, that means you're not enjoying and you're not suffering, you're just in neutral state. But material life is actually lived below the 0 line. We're always suffering, and when we can reduce that suffering a little bit, then we think that's pleasure, you see. But we never really get into the realm of real ananda and real bliss. So everyone in the material, we're living in that area below 0, and time is going, and then so then you reach human life, and you have various ways of trying to enjoy. Sex is there, and drugs, whatever. But it always comes to an end. It always comes to an end, and there's a price to pay. There's a price to pay. I love this statement in the 5th chapter because it's very revolutionary. Yehi sangsparjaja bhoga dukkha yona evate. You should know that enjoyment you're feeling when the senses are touching the sense objects, and every sense has its object, right? That very pleasure is the source of your misery. Now, it's very obvious in the case of drugs and things which we know are bad for us, right? But it's not so obvious that even the so-called wholesome enjoyments, which are purely sense enjoyment, maybe in a mode of goodness, is still a binding force. Is still a source of, because if it keeps you here in the material world to face birth, death, old age, and disease, that's a misery. So the source of that misery is your enjoyment and your desire to enjoy. As soon as you enjoy something, you plant a desire seed to enjoy it again, right? I mean, how many habits, did I develop as a kid, and then I gave them up eventually, just grew out of it, and replaced it with some other habit. I mean, that's just the way it is. But all that time, you're planting these desire seeds in your mind, which are there at the time of death, and if they're unfulfilled, bring you back again. Try to do it in the next life. So that's all a symptom of being in this bewilderment of duality, dvandva moha here. And how to get out of it, that's described in the next verse. So why don't we read the next verse, 28, because this is an important verse about giving up sin. Yesham tvandakatam papam jnanam punyakarmanam te dvandvamohani mukta bhajante mam jadarvata. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So this is how we can come out of this, by practicing bhajan, by practicing Krishna consciousness. But to do that with firm determination, we have to give up sinful activity with a strong vow. Purport. Those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously, and who have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then gradually they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in the association of pure devotees. For in the association of great devotees, one can be delivered from delusion. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.2 that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. Mahatsevam dwaramahu vimukte. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. Tamo dwaram yoshitang sangi sangam. All the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or to be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that there's different kinds of pious activity. This word punya, punya karma. There is material piety. One acts very morally and according to the rules and regulations in the Vedas, and is hoping for material elevation, either in this life or the next life on this planet, or even on a higher planet. There are higher planets, we call them heavenly planets, but that's not where God resides, that's where the gods reside. So that's called punya. But here, Krishna is not referring to that kind of punya. There's something called bhaktyunmukhi punya. Bhaktyunmukhi sukriti. Sukriti, I think, is the activity that gives you punya. And that means that these are the activities of devotion, devotional service. They're certainly pious, but they're not engaged in with the material motivation. The whole point of this bhakti pious activity, the activities of bhakti yoga, is to attain the highest position from which you never depart. Or every other, as Krishna explains in the 9th chapter very graphically, that Trividyamam somapa putapapa, very yagyadistra swargatim pratayante, those who worship me indirectly, according to the karma kanda section of the Vedas, so many descriptions for sacrifices and yagyas and various levels of austerity and so many things, for purification, with the aim of going to the heavenly planets. That's the aim. And they drink the soma juice and all these things. Trividyamam somapa, they worship me. Somapa putapapa, become purified of sin. That means they're performing pious activity. Yagya, sacrifice, ishtva swargatim pratiyanti, with the aim of going to swargatim, that's heavenly planets. Te punyam, pious, punyam asara surendra lokam ashnati divyan divideva bhogan. Such pious souls, if they do it properly, maybe for several births, they can go to Indraloka, or the heavenly planets. But then the next verse describes, Te tam bhukva swargalokam vishalam chine punye matya lokam vishanti. Having enjoyed godly delights for many, many years, millions of years maybe, eventually the punya is used up. It's just like credit in your bank account, right? You have a credit card, but there's a limit. You know, you go. I gave the example. You may work hard in Los Angeles, make some money, put it in the bank, then you take a vacation to Hawaii, right? You forget all about your job. You're enjoying what passes for godly delights on this planet, and you just pay with the credit card. And card, you know, you're enjoying like anything. The one day it spits out and says, "Oh, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry, this card is no good. Do you have another one?" I said, "No." Back to work, back to LA, right? Back to Marcha Loka, the world of birth and death. So Krishna, he's very pessimistic. He's very realistic. After, Swargala Vishala. Vishala means, very wide and deep and unprecedented enjoyments that you get on heavenly planet. Not like here. Tetam Chine punye matya lokam vishanti. Therefore, evam tahidam manupapanna agatakatam kama kama bhavanti. By these activities, you go and come. You don't really make any progress. It's just a vast diversion from what you should be doing. See, this is the problem. The heavenly planets, they're actually a big, what do I say? A temptation, for those who know the means. We know that there's not really any pleasure here. Oh, but up there in Svargaloka and Indraloka, we've read all about Nanda Gardens, We'll be very pious. We're not going to do sinful things, of course. We'll be very pious and we'll do sacrifices. We'll go every day to the temple and worship Durga. Whatever. Hare Krishna. She finally made it through the rain. I didn't think you were coming. And sure enough, that very verse I referred to today in the class is the one we're studying. We actually we read the next one now, but we started on 27 then. 7:27. Yeah. So that's not the way to go. So this punya that he's describing here is clearly bhakti punya. And we're page 340. 340. Dvandva mohanir mukta. See, remember he described here in the previous verse that Ichcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata. That by this desire to compete with Krishna, this is the verse I described for the fall. I sent you the documents? Did you? Yeah, on email. Check your email. Ichcha dvesha samutena, arising from the desire to enjoy sense gratification, and the hate, the rebellion against Krishna. We hate Krishna. Then immediately dvandva is there, the bewilderment of duality, material duality. And one comes into the material world. So the present verse we just read, but, you see that two, the second word there? This is also a very significant word. Yesham, it became a V because the next word begins with a vowel. So, but, on the other hand, however, the one who has completely eradicated the sin by punya karma. See, those people, those persons who have, by punya karma, and it described in previous lives also, in other words, it may take lifetimes to do this. But punya karma means pious activity in the realm of bhakti piety. You can get free from this dvandva moha, nirmukta, completely liberated from the bewilderment of duality, and then you can worship Krishna, you can practice bhakti with a firm determination. What makes our determination weak? The latent desires for sense gratification that weakens us. When we're yielding to those temptations, then it means that you're still bewildered by the dualities. You're not. So if you want to be fixed in your determination, then we have to practice the punya karma, which here means the practice of bhakti yoga with determination. And that, of course, involves relation with the guru and association with devotees. Now, Prabhupada mentions that in this purport, so important. He cites the teachings of Rishabdev. These are so important. I remember, this fifth canto is fifth canto, fifth chapter. It was part of the marathon, this book marathon we did back in '75. This was like legendary. Prabhupada ordered that all the books that were waiting to be printed. I was part of the press of lollygagging around. It took us a whole year to print the fourth canto. Too slow. Prabhupada said all those 17 books have to be printed in 2 months. And so Ramaswara, the in charge, said, Prabhupada, that's impossible. He didn't say it like that. He said, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And so Prabhupada said, he stopped his morning walk. He's on the beach, put his cane in the sand, looked at him and said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And he was serious. And so, Ramaswara realized Prabhupada is serious. So he dropped back into the end of the walk, and with the manager, Radha Ballabha, I knew him, he was very efficient. They were talking, well, okay, they were coming up with this, some way to do it. And so they returned to the walk and said, Prabhupada, we can do it. But we need your help. In other words, they said, under these conditions, we have to be able to consult you wherever you are. That means they have to call Prabhupada or telex him, at the time. There's no internet. 70s. And Prabhupada agreed to that they can bring anybody in, who could help with the production. I mean, I was there. They would fly people in, anyone who basically knew how to read, or, who had any experience indexing or something like that. So the whole kinds of people were flown in. And then the big thing was the artists. Like these paintings you see here, these paintings all took like at least a month or 2 months to do. They didn't have that time. They had like, it was 17 volumes, and each volume had like 8 paintings, How are they going to do all those paintings? So that was a big problem. So they came up with this idea, I don't know who came up with it, that if we could take pictures of Lord Chaitanya's pastime places, that would save a lot of time. You just go and take a photograph and use that picture. And Prabhupada agreed to that. So they sent a devotee there. I know his name is Bhagavad. And they funded everything, motorcycle. He started going around India taking all these pictures. And if you look at the first printing of the CC, you'll see all kinds. This is where Lord Chaitanya did this, where he did this, So that saved a lot of time. Anyway, all of that was put together. And this 5th canto was part of it, not just the CC. So these teachings of Rishabdev, now he begins with this it's on a different, it's almost like it's a very heavy, statements that he's making here. He's gathered his 100 sons, exalted sons, one of whom is Bharat himself, who's going to be the king of the world. And 90, is it 90? 89 other sons, 90 other sons are going to help him by being administrators around the world, and he's going to be the king. And 9 of the sons are the 9 Yogendras, great yogis and devotees, and they would just travel throughout the world and preach. And they have a whole section at the beginning of the 11th canto where they're teaching Maharaj Nimi. That's for another subject. But Maharaj, so now Rishabdev is getting ready to leave the kingdom. He's an incarnation of God, actually. He's going to leave, and amazingly, he takes sannyas, and he goes and he performs all these austerities. But before he does, he has these teachings. So the first verse is like this. It says, Nayam deho deha bhajang niloke, Krishtan kamanara David bhujange, tapo divyam putrakayena sattvam shuddye jismad brahma saukyam tvanantam. The Prabhupada, when this book came out, he was in India, and he would, wherever he went, he would preach on this verse. So there's like 10 lectures on this one verse, one after another. If you look in the series of lectures, you have them all, I think. So, what does he say there? He's speaking to his sons, and my dear son, putraka means sons, that anyone who has taken a human form of life should not waste it in trying to strive for different sense gratifications that are available to the stool-eating hogs. Well, is this Bhagavatam? Where's the gopis dancing in the rasa dance? This is the verse Prabhupada chose to speak on again and again in India. So, what should we do then? So he says, Tapo divyam putrakayena sattvam shuddye jisma brahma saukyam tvanantam. One has to embrace the idea as a human being that you're meant for austerity. In other words, it's not meant for just indulging our animal propensities. That leads to degradation and will lead to animal life. It's a tragic waste of human life. So he says you have to perform penance. And Prabhupada uses the word penance and austerity. It's interesting because penance means that you realize you've sinned and you have to undergo purification. It's not austerity alone is practiced by Hiranyakashipu. And so many people practice austerity. You become strong by austerity. So it has that element of penance to it. That's why it's tapo divyam. It's not just tapasya, but it's divine tapasya. What's the point? What happens there? Purification. Yena, by which shuddye sattvam. Sattvam here means your existence will become purified. Well, who cares about that? Because by that, yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam, then you can come to the state of being eligible to enjoy endless spiritual happiness. So he's not negating the desire to enjoy, he's just saying don't direct it to the senses but the animalistic life, which is degrading and a cause of pain. But, take on voluntary suffering, as prescribed for us, purify your existence, and you'll be able to come to the point of endless happiness. Right away it's challenging us to go for the shreyas rather than the prayas. That the difference. Immediate gratification versus ultimate gratification of the soul. So then the next verse is the one that Prabhupada cites here. Mahatsevam dvaramahava muktes. That how to, what do those austerities consist of? Well, the first point is Mahatsevam. Mahatsevam can be understood as serving a guru, a realized soul. Mahat is short for Mahatma. Mahatsevam dvaramahu. It opens the doors to liberation. You see? Now he's talking about liberation here from what? From our bondage, from our bewilderment. Right? That's the whole theme here, the last two verses. Liberation from illusion, liberation from suffering. We want that. Now, we know that in bhakti, you're supposed to graduate from that motive. You know, the ultimate, the greatest devotees, they don't care about liberation. Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam, najanam, nasundarim kavitam bhajagadisha kamaye. Wealth and women, followers, the fruits of mundane piety, liberation from this world of limitless anxiety. For me, O Lord, these common goals have not the slightest worth. Let me serve you purely now and in each future birth. My little attempt at poetry. But the point is that the pure devotees, they don't care about anything material, even up to and including liberation. But we're not at that stage. We should want liberation. You know, that's a good motive for us. Keep us going on the right side. We want to be free of material suffering. Krishna says, Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshana darshanam, that one of the elements of knowledge is to always be aware of the seriousness of this endeavor, because we're faced with birth, the old age, disease, and death. Who isn't faced with that? Everybody. You have two choices. You can try to forget about it and ignore it and dull the pain with sense gratification, or you can face up to the reality and deal with it. And most people think there's no way to deal with it. You know, there's just a way to mitigate it, and then you die and you're finished. But that's not right. You know, nobody dies. What's my other little statement? Everybody dies, nobody dies. You know, right? Everybody dies, nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. So it's a question of waking up. So he's quoting here, Matsevam dwaramahu. This word dwara means like a means. It's literally a door opens up. But tamo dwaram yoshidam sangi sangam. Those who are too attached to sense gratification, here symbolized by sex, if you associate with them, you'll become like them. And that opens the door to darkness and ignorance. So which door are we going to go through? There's that nice illustration, I think it's here, still in the Gita. We all have the same Gita. Let's see if I can find the page. I'll find a page here. I know it's here. It's got to be. Who's that editor that took it out? Come on. No, I don't see it. Must be in another edition. We just have this one, or is it more? Anyway, there's an illustration of a devotee. There's a stairway. Is it in the back somewhere? I only see this. I guess this is a cheap edition. Anyway, in the deluxe edition, there's a illustration, and you can see you have a choice, right? You can go down the stairs, or you can go up the stairs. One is the stairway to heaven, stairway to Godhead, and there is surrender to the Guru, austerity, bhakti, chanting the holy name, like that. And downward is lust and greed and envy, and then you have some prostitute, pulling the guy down into the So that's the choice we have. Is sensuality, ignoring this reality of birth and death and the miseries here, and simply living a life of illusion. And that's exactly what Rishabdev is saying to his sons. He says that, he's really, they're all exalted souls, but he's really teaching us. You don't have to give up the desire to enjoy. What you should do is, with intelligence, practice those austerities, limit your immediate so-called pleasure for purification, so you'll come to the state, you become eligible to enjoy forever. The pleasures of the spiritual life, which are not dependent on the physical body. It's a very simple statement, but it's so then in that one verse, the rest of the verse goes on. So Mahat Sevam Dwaramaha Vimuktes Tamo Dwaram Yoshitang Sangi Sangam. So then the question, well, who are those Mahatmas that I want to associate with? Mahantas te Samachitta Prasanta Vimanyabak Suridak Saravoye. He gives some qualities. What does he use? Mahanta and Mahatma are the same word. Samachitta, they are equipoised in this material world. That's a very important quality, is that they're tolerant, Mahantas te Samachitta, Prashanta, very much at peace. Who is at peace? Anyone who doesn't want anything of this material world. That's the first quality, Krishna says in the Gita. Samay Prashanta, Vimanyabak, they don't envy anybody. They have no enmity toward anyone. Because they don't want anything from anyone. They just want to give. This is Prahlad Maharaj. He was, the qualities of the sadhu described by Kapila Dev. The friend of every living entity has no enmity. Suriduk, Vimanyavak, Suriduk, sadhu. No, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up verses. Mahantaste, Samachitta, Prashanta, Vimanyavak, Suriduk, sadhavoye. Yeah, they're friend of all. So in the word by word meetings, Prabhupada has this very nice definition. He says the Mahantas or the Mahatmas, they have to be free of envy and peaceful, because when they approach people and try to give them Krishna consciousness, there's also a lot of opposition, and you have to be equipoise in there. Right, in the word by words he defined. So that's he goes on, of course, in his teachings, Rishabdev, but. The bottom line is that Krishna is describing here in the 7th chapter, and we're almost completed the chapter. We'll finish it on Monday. That if you want to know him, then you have to become free from the dualities of delusion, and the means of knowing him is by bhakti. So therefore we have to have punya karma. And means bhakti yoga practices, become free from the duality of delusion, and then we can worship him, we can practice bhakti with a firm vow, without deviating. And coming back to that. And in the last 2 verses, he's going to describe the benefits of bhakti, becoming free from old age, disease, and death, and knowing Brahma in truth, and Adhyatma, and all these other things. So he's going to describe that, and that'll lead us into chapter 8. Okay, any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I just really love this teaching you gave, because I caught something I was teaching last night. I was playing my flute in a gas station. 11 o'clock to about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Really? 2 hours of flute playing?
Yeah, I just played the flute. I just walked around and played the flute. Because I tried really hard. I took my case out, I put it out, I put $1 like all these other buskers. I put my flute. Everyone said, "This is the most beautiful thing I ever heard." Nobody gave me a dime. I was like, "Wow, this really sucks." I kept doing it. I was like, "What am I doing wrong?" I asked God, "What am I doing wrong?" He's like, "You know what? Why don't you stop doing that? Just forget about it. Just play the flute to me. Don't play to them anymore.
Okay.
Just play to me." So that's what I've been doing. I just played the flute to God, and I walked around. Well, the night before that, somebody gave me $20 from the gas station. He just came out of the thing and asked me why I was playing the flute, and I just told him because, I'm praying to God. And he said, "Well, what about God? Can you tell me something about God?" And I ended up talking to him for a while. And he bought us water, he bought us dinner, me and my wife.
You should take some little books with you. We have, you have some books about Krishna?
I was going to talk to Raja about that earlier. And then last night, I was doing the same thing again. I was playing for so long, and I just played and played and played. And these people came up and he's like, "Hey, would you like this cookie?" And he gave me a cookie, and I looked at it, I was like, "Hey, no." It's like, he felt so bad. He was like, "Oh my God," he kept apologizing. "Dude, it was a gift. It's okay. You're trying to give me a gift. It's all right." And then I said, "Well, forget about it." And I just started walking around outside, and I just kept playing because I wanted to play.
Right.
And some guy came and he gave me money again. And I swear, when he gave me the money, I was just in shock, like, "What's that?"
Oh, that's...
What's that for?
Yeah.
Because I suddenly realized that for the first time, I really didn't care. I didn't care about the money anymore. I didn't care about...
Well, here's the next thing to do, Darshan. You keep playing that flute, and when you get the money, you keep half of it because you need some expenses, and you give the rest to Krishna. And you'll see, you can put it in the hundi, this little, or whatever. And you'll see it'll increase because you could be doing direct devotional service. And plus the bead bag, you're chanting now, right? You learn how to chant? Okay, you always chant. Right. All right, we can discuss later. But thank you for that. We have 1 minute, so let me end with a poem. Where Krishna lives, felicity abounds. With pure simplicity and love and sensibility, all serve him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid of piety, he suffers in anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. The fall and redemption of the soul. We're just reading Ichadvesha Samatena. So we're going back to Godhead. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.